Hello friends, good morning. Welcome to my channel Essentials of Management. So today we are continuing with Occupational Health Management series. We will have discourse 5, which is part 5 of 5, that is the last part of the topic awareness of occupational health. Here we will discuss about hazards and its controls. It's the last step in the hazard management or the risk management. So what is the meaning of control of hazards? So you are aware, if just you recall, we completely saw the risk management process when we were discussing it in the industrial safety management series. That first you identify the hazards, then you do the exhaustive risk assessment, then you do the risk rating, and then you create the mitigation plan, means control plans for the hazards, the respective hazards. And there are various types of ways of controlling the hazards. So to avoid completely or to minimize, means first choice is you avoid completely or you minimize the ill effects of hazards on the health of employees. You need to establish controls. So controls are the part of the mitigation plans. For each type of hazards, the mitigation methods are different. The same method cannot be used for every hazard. So in particular, engineering and administrative controls and methods are different for different hazards. But there is a certain way of doing it in a systematic manner, and that is called as establishing hierarchy of control. So this word hierarchy is very important, that there is a way of doing it. You have to follow a certain hierarchy, a certain sequence. So what is that? That you first try for the elimination of the hazard. That means you are completely minimizing the risk, bringing the risk to the zero level. That should be your first effort. But it is not possible in every case. So what you do, that you try to substitute. Maybe process, maybe material. We'll discuss each step separately, exhaustively. So there is a substitution. If elimination is not possible, go for substitution. After substitution, still if the risk remains, then you have to create the engineering controls. In that there are containment, ventilation, then general ventilation, exhaust ventilation, air conditioning, and so on. Even if some risk remains after substitution, engineering control, but there is still some risk, then you have to go for the administrative control to bring it to the residual level. And even if the risk remains, and if there is no way of creating engineering control and administrative control, if there is a direct exposure to the hazard, you can't do anything. In that case, you have to go for personal protective equipment. So this is the priority. See, try to understand, when you do the grinding operation, the sparks and the burrs come out, and you just can't stop, because if you completely cover the that grinding wheel, how you will grind? So burrs are going to come out, and so you have to have the eye protection, and so you have to wear goggles. So that goggle create a barrier between the process and your eyes, right? So in such cases, personal protective equipment are used, and mind well, personal protective equipment are the last resort. We have a very wrong notion in particularly in Indian industries that if you give personal protective equipment to people, then the safety problem is solved or the hazard is minimized. That is not the case. You have to follow a complete hierarchy from elimination, substitution, engineering control, administrative control and personal protective equipment. So friends, let us see this one by one. So elimination. Does the process, step, task have to be done? Means there is a certain process of doing something. So you just try to have the job safety analysis and try to find out if there is certain step which is creating the hazard, can we eliminate that step, right? So if you can remove that step from the process, then elimination is possible. So there are different methods. See, why we have a parapet wall on the terrace of any building? We build the parapet wall for the safety. Why? Means someone cannot fall down easily from the terrace. So you build a parapet wall, so unless otherwise somebody has suicidal motives and somebody try to jump from the terrace, then and only then it is possible. So there is a elimination of the risk of falling down. Why we have railings to the staircases? To see that nobody falls from the side of the staircase, right? So you completely eliminate the risk of that hazard. So another example is that if it is possible to carry on the process at the lesser temperature so that less vapor is given off. So by lowering down the temperature, you have created a situation that the vapor which is coming out is in a very, very less quantity. So this is called as elimination, and this is the first step or first thinking when you are trying to have the mitigation plan. First you have to try the methods of elimination. Then second is substitution. If elimination is not possible, try to substitute. Change form of material, that is dust for granules or pellet. So in case of your blasting, if you are using granule or pellet, but if it is possible to use the dust, then you can use the dust. So there is a lesser chance of the harm. Use a different solvent which is having lower volatility or lower toxicity, both. So instead of benzene, benzene is a carcinogen. So can you use toluene instead of benzene? So substitute benzene with toluene, right? Then use aqueous solutions instead of solvents. So you can use aqueous paints or any other aqueous solution instead of using it with the solvent or dissolving it in the solvent. Aqueous means water, water-based products. Use glues and oils without sensitizers or carcinogen. So there are various types of glues and various types of oils used in the industries. So you see that when they are manufactured, they are devoid of the sensitizers or they are devoid of the carcinogen. A very simple example, nowadays there are eye drops available in the market which do not irritate your eyes. Previously the eye drops used to be very eye irritant, right? But nowadays you can demand to the medical shop, that medicine shop, that you give me the eye drop without the irritation or without irritants, right? So substitution. So you are trying here to bring down the risk Now it is not eliminated completely. Now engineering controls are many. So if a machine is making lot of noise, you create the enclosure. A very good example of this is the new generation generators. All the generators of the new generation, they come with the complete enclosure, so that the noise level is bring down to a very great extent. Even there are acoustics used in the panels of that generator enclosures. So enclosed. So apart from generators, there are many machines on the shop floors. They create the noise, a noise beyond the limits, and so you have to create the enclosures for such machines. You have to create enclosure for sandblasting machine, so that the pellets are not going out, so they are stopped. So this is one type of engineering control. You reduce generated source emission. Now take the example of the vehicles. So in case of vehicles, you have the new designs of the engine, that means Euro 1, Euro 2, Euro 3, Euro 4 like that, or Bharat 1, Bharat 2, Bharat 3, Bharat 4, in which the emissions go down. So you give preference. Now Indian government has asked the car manufacturer to use Bharat 6 engines, where the emission is very less. Then for controlling the noise, we have silencers in all the cars or all the vehicles, including trucks. There are silencers to the generators, so you reduce the sound level. So there is a containment of facilities or the plant. So you create a boundary or the area. So you create the bunds for the tanks, where the different solvents are stored, or the oils are stored, or some inflammables are stored. So they, even if there is a spillage, they do not spread to a larger area. Reduce, eliminate need for maintenance staff in the area. So if that you are doing some maintenance job and there is a risk of some exposure, more risk, so you see that minimum people work there in that area. Take the example of X-ray room in the hospitals. Only patient and the technical person, they go inside the room. All others are stopped going inside the room when there is a X-ray taken. Okay. So reduce the people in that area. Limit area contaminated if spills and leaks. So I talked about the bunds. Then there is a local exhaust ventilation, by which you take out the contaminated or stale air from that particular area, or there is a forced ventilation. That means you bring in the fresh air from outside inside the workshop or workplace. Then there is air conditioning and so on. So these are all different engineering controls method we discussed. So after elimination, after substitution, if the risk remains, if you want to bring down the risk more, then you have to use the engineering controls, which we discussed in a exhaustive manner. After engineering control, if still the risk remains, then you have to have the administrative controls. So if there is an area where there is a exposure to the people are exposed to the hazards in spite of trying all the engineering controls or substitution, then you minimize the number of people working in that area. So if there are some non-destructive tests being carried out, so there has to be very minimum number of people working in that area, those who are only essential for the process. So reduce to the minimum. number of personnel and reduce the level and duration of the exposure. So how you can reduce the level and duration of exposure? By reducing the working hours. Means instead of 8 hours, the duty is of 6 hours. Then you have more number of breaks. So instead of 2 breaks, you give 4 breaks, right? And the third is rotation of the people. That means you rotate the employees. So if the person is there for a week, in next week some other person replaces him and that person goes to some other job. So job rotation and giving more number of breaks and reducing the duration of the job, that is from 8 hours to 6 hours. So by this you are reducing level and duration of the exposure. Then you reduce the quantities of substances used or produced. So try to minimize the use of that particular hazardous substance. See, why there is a exposure or wastage of the pesticides or used in the farms in India? Because we use very wrong methods of spraying the pesticides. If you use the proper method of spraying the pesticides, the quantity of the pesticide will reduce, so there will be a cost saving. At the same time, the exposure can also be reduced. So secondly, work practice changes. As I said just now, that use a spraying method which releases less pesticide. Then instead of sweeping by broom, you can do the vacuum cleaning, so there is no exposure or very less exposure to the dust. Okay. Then keep on cleaning the surfaces regularly where there are certain operations where the contamination can settle down on the various surfaces in that area. So you have to keep on, in laboratory you have to keep on cleaning the laboratory tables, right? Why? Because there may be some settling of certain dust or some particles of which are coming out of the laboratory operations. So regular cleaning where there is a danger of the biohazards, then again there is a you have to regularly clean the surfaces. Very simple example, why there is a continuous cleaning or mopping of the surfaces floor carried out in the hospitals, for the same reason that the contamination is removed. Safe chemical storage and waste disposal. So you see that chemicals are stored properly and they are segregated. So hazardous chemicals are stored separately, non-hazardous are stored separately. Whatever the waste is generated, particularly say biomedical waste in the hospital, so there is a way of disposing the waste. You have to incinerate the biomedical waste, isn't it? So this is another administrative control. So hygiene arrangement, facilities for washing, storage of PPE, arrangements for laundering the clothes. So these are the hygiene arrangement. So if there is a exposure to the contamination, so there is a facility given for washing rooms or bathrooms, where after your job is completed you can have a wash and then come out, you can wash your clothes even, and there should be a proper place for storing the PPE, because if the PPE is not stored properly and if you don't find the PPE when it is required, then there is a chance that you enter the area without the PPE. Then prohibit eating, drinking and smoking in the area where there is the evolution of dust or fumes or some hazardous or toxic chemicals. Personal protective equipment, it is the last resort. In the hierarchy, it's the last one. So last resort, not technically feasible to achieve control by engineering or administrative method. I just talked about the example of the grinding wheel. So such are many places where such is the case that even after engineering control or administrative control you cannot eliminate the hazard, and so you have to create a barrier between the hazard and the human body. So you wear goggles while you are doing the grinding. So there are machine guards given, so that it's one type of a protection. Or you wear the helmet in the area where there is a chance of something falling down from the top, or you are working at the height and there is a chance of falling down. In that case you have to use the helmet. So this is the way of creating the barrier between hazard and your body. So while engineering and or administrative controls are being installed or implemented, means particularly at the time of maintenance, there is a very much need of wearing the different PPE for additional redundant protection. If you want to have additional protection, instead of even you have the engineering and administrative controls, urgent and emergency situations and maintenance activity. So every area they define the mandatory PPE, and people working in that area are supposed to use that mandatory PPE. So what are the principle of hierarchy of control? Designed to minimize emission. I explained with the Bharat 1, Bharat 2 engines. So designed to minimize emission, releases and spread of hazardous substances. Take into account all relevant exposure routes. So you know the routes of exposure, that ingestion, inhalation, injection, and the mucous membrane and absorption. So these are the different ways through which the chemicals enter our body. So if there is a exposure to the vapor or fumes, you can have mask, right? So take into account all relevant exposure routes. If your hands are being contaminated, before eating you wash the hands or use the hand gloves, okay, so your hands are not contaminated. Control exposures by measures proportionate to health risk. So how should be the control measure? The extent of control measure or extent of mitigation plan proportion to the risk to your health. So example is in any vaccine manufacturing plant. So there are core areas A, B, C, D, like that. So in the first core area you use only a basic minimum PPE, but when you go inside, then you have to use the mask, different types of masks, or you have to use the suit, entire suit, when you are going to the last core area. So the risk is more, and so the precautions you are taking are more. Choose most effective and reliable control option. So there are 2, 3, 4 options, and you choose the most effective and reliable control. So provide in combination with other controls suitable PPE if adequate control cannot be achieved by other means. So already discussed that if some residual risk remains and if there is a need to create the barrier, then you have to supply the PPE. But before that, you have to see that you are doing maximum substitution activity, you are creating highest amount of the engineering control and the administrative controls. Check and review all elements of control measures regularly. Now you have to just establishing the controls is not enough. You have to keep on checking and reviewing the controls and see that they are sufficient and they are working properly. And if you find some new way of doing it, you can change the previous controls and establish a new control which will give you more protection. Provide information, instruction, training on hazards, risk and use of controls. This is one type of a administrative control, that you are you providing the information fully. See, MSDS is providing information about that particular chemicals, what are the hazards while using that chemical, that is material safety data sheet. So every chemical which you bring into your factory or your facility, there has to be MSDS associated with it by the manufacturer or the supplier. So provide information, instruction, so instruction about the work methods, train the people, what are the hazards and why all these controls are to be created, how they have to take the precautions, and they should know about the risk, what are the health risks, what are the safety risks, and they should be convinced to use those controls and PPE. So there is always a hesitance to use PPE, but if people know properly why this PPE is to be used, they will use it, they will not avoid using that PPE. Ensure introduction of controls does not increase the overall risk. Means you are not creating another hazard. By creating control, you minimize one hazard, but you create another hazard, right? So that should not be the case. So these are the principles of creating hierarchy of control. So in this discourse, we discussed exhaustively about the hierarchy of control, which is the last step in the risk management process. And so thank you very much for watching. Friends, you can resume viewing by switching on to discourse 6. So here the first awareness about the occupational health is over, and we will start with the new topics of ergonomics, where we will try to understand what is ergonomics. Friends, please do not forget to like, share, comment and subscribe to my channel. Thank you very much. Have a good day.